Some jokes are not jokes. They are things you have been wanting to say for so long that when they finally come out, you dress them in a smile and call them humour. I called my husband my biggest life mistake at our anniversary dinner in front of a full restaurant, and I raised my glass while I said it. By the next morning, our lawyer had called. She was not calling on my behalf. My name is Maya. I am 33 years old, and I work as a marketing director at a mid-sized firm in the city. I have a good apartment, a good salary, and a husband named Daniel who sets my wine glass on the correct side of the plate every single time. We have been married for 6 years. Before that, we dated for 2. Before that, I was 25 and completely certain I knew what I wanted. Daniel is 36. He works in operations for a tech company. By almost any reasonable measure, he is a good man. He remembers things. He books restaurants before I think to ask. He used to leave me voicemails when he worked late. Not check-ins, but real voicemails, 3 or 4 minutes long, about something that happened on his commute, or a conversation he had at lunch that he thought I would find funny. He talked to me like I was the only person worth telling things to. That stopped about 2 years ago after his promotion. He did not stop caring. He just ran out of space, and I told myself that was fine. I told myself that for 2 years. There is a candle in our apartment, a pillar candle in dark amber, the kind that takes forever to burn down. Daniel bought it for our first apartment before we got married. It has sat on every dinner table we have ever shared. It smells like cedar and smoke. On good evenings, it made the small dining table feel like it belonged somewhere important. On the Tuesday 3 weeks before our anniversary, I was having dinner with Daniel when my phone buzzed under the table. It was Corey, a freelance designer on a client project, sending a voice note about a revision. I listened to it with one earbud, smiled at something he said, and set the phone face down. Daniel was talking about a logistics issue at work. I nodded and said something supportive and poured more wine, and the candle burned between us. That night, I described our apartment to Priya, my closest friend, as very safe. I meant it as a compliment. It did not come out that way. That was the moment I should have paid attention to. Not Corey, not the phone under the table, the word I chose. The coffee shop was 2 blocks from my office, and I started meeting Corey there on Wednesdays. Not every Wednesday, just often enough that it became a pattern without anyone naming it. We talked about work at first, the client project, his design process, the way certain brands fall apart when they stop understanding their own voice. Then we talked about other things. He asked me questions I had not been asked in a while, not about my job or my commute or what I wanted for dinner, but about what I actually thought about things, what I wanted from a given year, whether I had ever gotten something completely wrong and only understood it later. He asked like the answers mattered to him. I am not sure how long it had been since I felt that way. I told myself it was a professional relationship with good chemistry. That is what I told myself in our kitchen on the first Wednesday that Daniel was home when I left. I was already dressed and had my bag over my shoulder. Daniel was making coffee at the counter and asked where I was going. I said I had a client breakfast. He handed me a travel mug with the lid already on. I took it and walked out the door. It was the first time I had looked him in the face and lied. I did not feel guilty on the walk to the coffee shop. That bothered me more than the lie itself. Guilt would have meant something in me was still whole. By the 3rd Wednesday, Priya was asking careful questions. We had lunch that Friday at the place near her office with the good soup, and she let me talk about Corey for almost 15 minutes straight without interrupting. I talked about his work, the way he explained things, a specific conversation about what it means to choose a life versus build one. He had said there was a real difference between the two, and I had been thinking about it for 3 days after. When I finished, Priya was quiet for a moment. Then she asked whether Daniel knew this person existed. I told her of course he did. It was a work contact. She stirred her coffee and said that was good. She said it in the tone people use when they are recording something for later. She did not believe me. I knew she did not believe me. Neither of us said so out loud. We changed the subject. And I went back to the office and messaged Corey about nothing important, just to see how fast he would respond. He responded fast. The first time Daniel tried to talk to me about something being off, I was on my phone in bed on a Sunday night. He sat down beside me and asked, quietly, whether everything was okay with the client project, the one I had mentioned twice a few weeks earlier and then stopped bringing up. He said he had noticed I seemed somewhere else. His voice was not accusing. It was the voice he used when he still believed asking would get him somewhere. I told him I was tired and that everything was fine, that he was reading into ordinary tiredness, that not every silence from me needed decoding. He waited for me to finish. Then he said there was something else. He brought up a specific Sunday 3 weeks before, remembered the exact evening when we had sat in the living room after dinner and he had asked about my day and I had answered fine twice and then picked up my phone without looking at him. He said he was not asking about that day in particular. He was asking whether something had changed between us, whether there was something he had missed or done wrong, whether we needed to talk about something he did not know about yet. He said he would rather know than not know. I told him not every thought I had required reporting, and that expecting constant emotional transparency was a form of control. I said I was allowed to have an inner life that was not up for inspection. He looked at me for a long moment. Something in his face moved in a way I did not try to read. Then he said okay, turned off his lamp, and went to sleep facing the wall. I lay there for a long time after that, going over the word I had chosen. Control. I used it because it worked. It made him the problem instead of the question. I had seen other women use that word, watched it shut things down cleanly, and I used it the same way here. The difference was that those other women had believed what they were saying. I was not sure I did. That was the moment I should have said something true. Instead, I picked up my phone and sent Corey a link to an article I thought he would like. He replied at 11:47 with a voice note, 4 minutes long. I listened to it in the bathroom, door closed, both earbuds in, sitting on the edge of the tub. The following week, Corey posted a photo from the coffee shop to Instagram. He tagged the location, wrote "Best Conversation of the Week" as the caption. I was in the background, clearly there, clearly mid-laugh, clearly not at any client breakfast. Daniel did not see it. Priya did. I know because she texted me that afternoon about something else entirely, and her tone was slightly too careful. She was being kind, but she was also filing it away. Something shifted in the apartment that week. Nothing dramatic, nothing I could have pointed to clearly. Daniel was slightly more organized than usual. The laptop charger had a consistent spot for the first time in years. A kitchen drawer that had been a pile of loose papers for as long as I could remember was suddenly sorted into a labeled folder. His keys went on the same hook every evening. The recycling got taken out before I even noticed it was full. Small things. The kind of things that individually meant nothing, and taken together still meant nothing to me at the time. I told myself it was a work phase. I told myself that several times, which should have told me something. There was one evening he came home late, and I had already eaten. I was on the couch with my laptop, and he stood in the doorway for a moment before saying anything. He looked tired in a way that was not about work, a kind of tired that comes from carrying something carefully for too long. He asked if I wanted to watch something together. I said I was in the middle of something. He said okay, and went to make dinner alone. I could hear him in the kitchen, the sound of one plate, one glass, the refrigerator opening and closing. I did not get up. The next morning he made coffee for both of us without being asked, and left mine on the counter with the lid already on. Exactly the temperature and ratio I like it. I drank it on the commute. I did not say anything about it when I left, and he did not mention it either. That was still the same week. The anniversary dinner was at Alma. We have been going there for 7 years. Our third date, then the engagement dinner, then every anniversary since. There is a table near the window the owner gives us when he can, and he always can. He usually has Daniel's wine already poured by the time we sit down. Daniel had made the reservation 3 weeks in advance and mentioned it exactly once in passing the week before. He also bought me a book. Not a gift card, not something off a list. A specific title I had mentioned in April while we stood in line at a pharmacy, and I read the back cover and put it down because there were 3 people ahead of us, and I did not want to carry it. He had remembered that for 6 months. I found it on the bed, wrapped in brown paper with a small card, the evening of the dinner. My first thought, standing there holding it, was, this is a person who has been paying attention the whole time. My second thought came half a second later and surprised me with how honest it was. I did not know what to do with that. Priya was at Alma the same evening, a birthday dinner for one of her husband's colleagues at a table across the room. We saw each other when we walked in, exchanged a wave and a smile, the small gestures of 2 people in the same space who belonged to different evenings. We did not sit together, but she was close enough to see our table and I knew Priya. She looked. She always looked. That was the thing about Priya. She paid attention in a way that had always felt like love, and that evening felt like something else. The dinner started the way it always does. Daniel ordered what he always orders and asked if he could try a bite of mine before I actually agreed, reaching across with his fork. That combination of presumption and affection I had always found irritating and endearing at the same time. Early in the meal, he was reading the dessert menu before we had even touched the appetizers, and for a moment I nearly laughed, nearly said something honest about how much I loved that specific habit of his, how it was so entirely him. I did not say it. I picked up my water glass and talked about a project at work instead. The amber candle was on our table, not our candle, the restaurant uses them throughout the room, but the same dark amber pillar, same shape, same smell of cedar and wax, flickering in the draft from the air conditioning. From the outside, the table probably looked warm. From where I sat, we were discussing a construction project on my street. The couple at the next table changed the mood of the whole room. They were young, or maybe just very happy in a way that looks like youth. The man got down on one knee between courses and the woman put both hands over her mouth, and the restaurant did what restaurants do when that happens. Applause, tears, the owner appearing with champagne, strangers smiling at each other. I watched it happen. What I felt watching it, I still have trouble naming. Not jealousy. Not quite longing either. Something closer to grief. The kind that comes from recognizing something you once had and quietly stopped reaching for. I did not let it land. I turned it into something else before it could settle, the way I had learned to do with any feeling that was too honest to be useful. I turned it into a performance. I raised my glass. I said something about wishing I could bottle that feeling, and I said it loud enough that the tables nearby could hear me, which was the first sign this was not a private thought I was sharing with my husband. Then I looked at Daniel and said he had been my biggest life mistake, but at least he was an interesting one. I said it with a smile. I delivered it like a punchline I had been building to all evening. Several people nearby made the sound you make when you cannot tell if something is funny or if you just witnessed something you were not supposed to see. An exhale that is not quite a laugh. Daniel made no sound. He set his fork down very carefully, the way you set something down when you need your hands to be still. He asked me very quietly whether that comment had been for me or for the room. I told him not to make a scene out of a joke. I told him he always did this, turned everything heavier than it needed to be, and that doing it at our own anniversary dinner, right after a proposal happened at the next table, was genuinely exhausting. He picked his fork back up. He did not speak again for a while. What I did not do was look at his face carefully. If I had, I would have seen that what was there was not the hurt I expected, and honestly had counted on a little. It was something past hurt, something that had already moved on to the next step. Priya was watching our table. I caught her looking and turned away quickly. About 10 minutes later, when the restaurant noise came back to normal and the engaged couple was taking photos with the owner, the quiet at our table felt very specific, very located. I picked up my wine glass because my hands needed something to do. Before I gave it conscious permission, something in me registered that the comment had not been a joke, and that it had not really been for him at all. It had been for the room. He just happened to be sitting at the table it landed on. I covered it. I ordered the chocolate tart. I started a story about something that happened at work. I have always been good at that part. Priya had been taking a photo of her food, a slightly overhead shot for her stories. The angle was off enough that our table ended up in the background of the frame. Me mid-gesture, wine glass raised, expression sharp and bright. Daniel's face clearly visible, if you had any reason to look at it. She did not post the photo. She looked at it, understood what it showed, and saved it without saying anything. Daniel's mother Sandra communicates in temperature, not words. She does not raise her voice or confront things directly. She adjusts the warmth available in a room, and you feel it long before she says anything specific. I had always respected that about her. I had also always been a little afraid of it. That Sunday at lunch, I understood why. She had invited us for the Sunday 4 days after the anniversary dinner. Word of what happened at Alma had travelled the way these things travel in a shared social circle. One person to the next, the story picking up details at each step. A woman we both knew from a neighbourhood event had been at the restaurant that evening, she told Sandra's neighbour. Sandra heard it by Thursday. By the time we arrived on Sunday, she had had 2 days to decide what to do with the information. The lunch was excellent. She cooked what Daniel had loved since he was a kid, set the table carefully, asked about my work like she was genuinely interested, refilled glasses without being asked, passed every dish. By any measure, a gracious hostess. It was only right at the end, when Daniel had gone to help clear the main plates and Sandra and I were alone in the kitchen for maybe 4 minutes, that she said anything that mattered. She said she hoped I knew I could come to her if anything felt heavy. She said marriage could be hard, that everyone who had been married long enough knew that, and that sometimes people said things that did not come out the way they meant. Her voice was warm and steady. Her eyes were doing something else entirely, noting things, measuring things, storing them somewhere I could not see. I told her I was fine, that the comment was a joke, that Daniel had a tendency to take certain things more literally than was intended. She nodded and handed me a dish towel. The conversation closed, but both of us understood, without saying it, that the message had been delivered and that this particular kindness came with a sharp edge. On the drive home, I brought up Sandra's behaviour, said she had no business inserting herself into something private between a husband and wife. Daniel said he had not told her. He said things have a way of moving when you say them in a restaurant full of people who know your name. I started to say something back. He changed the subject to a bill payment we needed to handle, and the whole tone of the conversation shifted, and I let it go. That evening in our bedroom, I stood in the doorway and watched him sit on the edge of the bed. Not on his phone, not reading, just there, in the room, the way a person is when they are making a decision quietly and without an audience, not rehearsing it, just making it. He sat there for several minutes. I started talking. I said Sandra's reaction had been out of proportion. I said the anniversary comment was being treated like a formal statement of intent when it was a single remark at a dinner, and that felt unfair to me. He did not turn around while I spoke. He was not giving me silence as punishment. I had seen Daniel actually angry before, and this was not that. He was somewhere else inside himself, sitting with the fact that his marriage had been called a mistake publicly by the person he was married to, and figuring out what that meant. I did not see that. I saw a man using stillness to apply pressure, and I decided to handle it differently. I sat down next to him. I told him I understood the comment had landed badly, that I could see why it hit the way it did. I said I sometimes used humour to manage feelings I did not have language for, that when something mattered enough to scare me, I made it smaller so I could stay in the room with it. I said the comment came from how much I cared, just expressed badly. I touched his arm while I said it. I was convincing. I had convinced myself first, which is the only way that kind of thing actually works. He looked at me for a moment. Then he asked who Corey was. He said it the way you say something you have already thought through from every angle and are not afraid of any answer. Not escalating, not accusing. He said he had seen the Instagram photo, the one Corey posted from the coffee shop, where I was in the background at a location I had told Daniel was a client breakfast. He said he just wanted to know who the person was. I said Corey was a freelance designer on a project, that the photo was from a working meeting, that I had not mentioned him specifically because it was not significant enough to mention. I kept my voice even. I gave him enough true facts to make the untrue arrangement of them hold. He did not push. He said okay, got up, and went to his office. I told myself it had worked. I told myself the conversation was over and that we would get back to something normal with a little time. I have spent a lot of time since then thinking about how completely I believed that, how easy it was to believe, and what that says about how well I actually knew him. What he actually did in that office I found out later from the lawyer. He opened his laptop and went through 3 months of our shared calendar. He compared dates against charge records on the joint account. He found the coffee shops that did not match any client names I had mentioned. He organized everything into a folder labeled with a date and did it all without music, without asking me a single follow-up question. The next morning I noticed the watches. Daniel has 5 of them, nothing expensive, but each one has a story he can tell you. They had lived on a small cloth-covered tray on the bedroom dresser for 6 years. I knew where they were without thinking about it, the way you know where anything is that has always been in one place. That morning the tray was empty. I opened his top drawer and found all 5 laid carefully inside, side by side in a cloth. He had moved them without saying a word about it. That was all it was. A drawer instead of a tray. It said everything. The last real conversation we had was a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner. Daniel came home and said he wanted to talk. His voice had a quality I had never heard from him before. Not cold, not angry, just final. The way a sentence sounds when it has already ended and is waiting for the other person to get there. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked, directly, whether I wanted to be in this marriage. He said the question was not a threat or an ultimatum. He said it was a real question and he wanted a real answer. He named the anniversary comment, the Corey situation, the weeks of conversations that had started and closed without going anywhere. He said he was not asking what was wrong with him or what was wrong with the marriage in general. He was asking what I, specifically, actually wanted. I told him he was turning one difficult period into a judgment on everything we had. I said people go through stretches like this, that tension does not automatically mean something is broken, and that the way he was framing the question made it impossible to answer without it becoming final. I said he was making everything bigger than it was. He waited for me to finish. Then he said something I was not ready for. He said that if I was genuinely unhappy, he wanted to actually address it. Therapy, an honest conversation, whatever shape was useful. He said if I wanted to leave, he would not stand in the way. But he said he was not going to spend the next 10 years in something where things were kept just uncertain enough to prevent any real movement. He said he needed to know where he stood. His voice was level the whole time. It did not waver once. That was the part I kept thinking about later. I started to cry. I told him he always did this, turned every conversation into a line to cross or a decision to issue. And somehow it always ended with me being the one who had to explain herself. I said every exchange we had eventually became me on the stand and him presiding. I said I was exhausted from being made to feel like the problem in every room we shared. That part, at least, was true. I was exhausted. I just did not understand yet, from what. He sat with that for a moment without responding to it. Then he said he needed to make some calls in the morning. He rinsed his glass and set it in the rack and went to bed. I sat in the kitchen alone after he left. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt chosen. The amber candle was on a shelf in the living room, where I had moved it some weeks earlier when I rearranged the bookcase. I could see it from where I was sitting. It was not lit. It had not been lit in a while, actually. I could not remember when we had stopped. I picked up my phone. I took a photo of the wine glass on the table, the kitchen light catching it softly, and posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Learning to tell the truth, even when it costs you." Then I put the phone face down on the table and told myself I had done something honest. Within 20 minutes, 32 people had responded. Heart emojis, fire emojis. An old colleague who had known me since my first job wrote that she had always admired how I moved through hard things. A woman I had met once at a marketing conference 3 years ago wrote that she needed to see these words today. 3 people sent private messages. I read every single one. What I expected to feel was some version of relief, the particular satisfaction of naming something true and being seen for it. What I actually felt was harder to describe and worse than I expected. Not numb exactly. More like watching yourself perform something and realizing midway through that you forgot to feel anything while you were doing it. 32 people had received a version of me and found it meaningful. That had always been enough before. I sat with the fact that it was not enough now and did not know what to do with that. Priya saw the post. She took a screenshot and sent it to Daniel. His phone lit up on the coffee table while I was still sitting there. I could see the notification before he came out. A contact name I did not recognize. Monsieur Kell. He came out from the bedroom, looked at the screen, picked up the phone, and took it back with him. The door closed. I did not follow him. I sat on the couch with the wine glass and the responses still coming in and the unlit candle on the shelf, and I did not move for a long time. M. Kell, I found out later, was Margaret Kell, a family law attorney with an office 4 blocks from where Daniel worked. He had consulted with her twice in the 2 weeks before that conversation at the kitchen table. My phone rang at 9:14 the following morning. The number was familiar before I placed it. Rachel, the attorney who had handled our wills 8 years ago, the apartment purchase, a contract dispute with a former employer. Rachel, who knew both of us. Rachel, who said she was calling as a professional courtesy and that I should understand what it meant that she was calling me that way. She said Daniel had filed for divorce the previous afternoon. She said temporary orders on the joint accounts were pending review. She said I should retain independent counsel quickly, that she was no longer in a position to advise me, and that she was sorry. She said that last part in the voice people use when they mean it. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after the call ended, the phone still in my hand. I called Priya. I said Daniel had overreacted, that the Instagram post was not what it looked like, that I had been trying to be honest about something, and he had used that against me. Priya was quiet for longer than felt comfortable. Then she said she had been at Alma. She said she was 3 tables away. She said she had heard the comment, and she had seen his face, and that she had told him because she could not watch a person get called a mistake in a restaurant full of people and go home and say nothing to anyone about it. She said it without any anger in her voice. She said it like a fact she had needed to say for some time, and the waiting had cost her something too. That was the part that was hardest to sit with. Not that she had told him, but that she had watched the whole thing unfold and still chosen to be kind to me for as long as she had. The practical changes came quickly. The joint account was frozen pending the orders, which gave me about 2 weeks of personal funds before I needed to sort out the rest. The social circles split in ways I had not expected, along lines I had not seen clearly before. 3 people I had thought were mine sent Daniel messages that same week without mentioning it to me. I signed a lease on a furnished sublet in a neighborhood I did not know well. Corey, when I told him what had happened, said he had not realized how serious things were between Daniel and me, and that he needed some time to think. And then he went quiet. I went back to work. My title did not change, but something in the way my manager looked at me did. A meeting was scheduled to discuss my social media activity and what it might mean for the company's professional image. The amber candle is on a shelf in the sublet. I brought it because leaving it behind felt like a step I was not ready to take, and I did not want to examine that too closely. I have not lit it. I am not sure what I am waiting for. I spent years believing that saying the honest thing, the uncomfortable and unvarnished thing, was the brave choice. I built a whole version of myself around that and carried her into every room I walked into. I am only beginning to understand, and there is no comfortable way to finish this sentence, that there is a difference between honesty and the performance of honesty, and that I confused the two so completely for so long that I am genuinely not sure which one I was ever actually doing. The divorce hearing is 6 weeks from now. Corey has not called. The sublet smells like someone else's cleaning products, and I keep one window cracked at night because the silence is too clean and I have not adjusted to it yet. Rachel referred me to a colleague who handles family law. I have an appointment on Thursday. One person texts every day to check in. Not Priya, someone I did not expect. A person from the old neighborhood who I always assumed was more Daniel's friend than mine. Priya and I have not spoken since that phone call, and I am not sure we will, and I am not sure who that says more about. The amber candle is on the shelf where I put it on the first day. It still smells like cedar and smoke, exactly the same as it always did, and I don't know yet if that's a comfort or not. I do not light it, because I am not sure I am allowed to anymore, and I am not sure what I would even be lighting it for.